Fine. Sorry for the interruption. So I have inserted a code cell. I have inserted a text cell. I told you about the shortcuts with which you can do this. And let us start doing some formatting. First thing is header. Okay. In Google Colab actually borrows a lot of different patterns from different technologies that we are familiar with, like HTML, then LaTeX, then Jupyter Notebook, as I told you previously, then Python execution. All these are there, and then linking and all these things are already there. Pre-existing technologies, techniques are there. Jupyter just borrows them and puts them into one place. Whatever the best practices are, it follows all of them. So if I have to create a heading, I just put hash, and hash is very similar to the h1, h2, h3 tags that we are familiar with in HTML. So if you have to put a header number one, I mean the biggest header, you put one hash, and then you can write anything like, okay. So when I write this, you see I have two different small windows. In the left window, I write something and I see what I'm writing. And in the right window, it's displaying the rendering effect, how this will actually look like. So in the left hand side, I have my code written. So I have hash heading one, which means that I'm going to create a heading one with text heading one. If I have to increase the size, the lower headings, I can heading 2, similarly 3 hashes leading to heading 3, and so on. As you can observe, the size is decreasing. Heading 1 is largest, heading 2 is smaller, heading 3 is even smaller, and so on. Similarly, you can have up to 5. Right? So you see the size is decreasing. This way you could control the text size. Now, if I have to convert it into bold and italics, bold and italics, I just need to surround them with asterisks. Okay, if I have to convert anything to bold, I will surround it with double asterisks like this. You observe this heading became bold, or let me just do this for the first heading. Okay, first heading became bold. If I have to do anything, make something italics, I will surround it with underscore or single star. Just you can give me a moment. Sorry. So I can do this italic again with single asterisk, and the effect will be same, the italics. Okay, so with this I can do italics. If I have to do strike through, I can do it using tilde. So I can strike through the text. These are all formatting that is provided by Google. Okay, now you have this left and right combination. You press shift enter, the left one will be gone, and you will be shown the right hand side, which is the actual rendering of the text that you are willing to display. Okay, so markdown, we know to see markdown source, double click a text cell. If you want to see the source, you double click over here. You will see the source on left hand side and rendering effect on the right hand side. If you want to change this from left right to top bottom, you can click this button and it will display as top bottom. So on top you will see the code, and bottom you will see the rendering effect. Okay, I prefer it left and right. So now, as I told you, headers are created using hash. You can use multiple hashes for less emphasis. For example, this. To do bold, italic, and strike through, I've already told you to make bold, surrounded with two asterisks. To make italic, surrounded with single asterisk or underscore. To make strike, to do strike through, you surround it with tilde. Okay. surrounding it using two tildes. I think I did the same with single tilde only. If you have to do a monospace is something, if in my code, if in my text I want to write some code and I want to explain it to the user, then we do monocode. So like what I want to say is, in C programming we use printf function. Okay, so I have this text, but in this printf is a coding thing. I want to show it differently, so I'll surround it with single tick. Okay, so you see over here the way the printf is written, it's a mono-spaced sans serif font, so it is displayed differently than the text that is written. Okay, the text that is written, it is displayed differently. So you would observe over here, you see, if you could observe it, you would find that it is written differently. So you see, in C programming we use printf function. So printf has got a bit of shading, background shading, as well as the text that is written is mono spaced. Okay, now so we can similarly use indentation and less. To create indentation, we can what we do is we use the we use the symbol greater than. So if I have to indent something, I put a greater than sign before this, so it will indent. Okay, it will indent. See, this is indentation. It shifts, it puts a tab space before the text. If I can do multiple indentations, and it will do it like this, right? Multiple indentations are allowed. Fine. If you have to do listing, so listing can be either unordered or ordered listing. If I have to do an unordered listing, it means bullets. Just simply put something and put a star before that. Okay, whatever text you want to write, you can put a star before that, and it will create a bullet effect. If you have to do an ordered listing, just put the text. Okay, so just put the numbers 1 dot 2 dot 3 dot, and this you see the bold, the blue part is the reserved formatting with which it identifies the format. You all are computer science students, so you know what is the significance of reserved words and reserved keywords. So this is a reserved keyword with which it identifies that this is going to be an ordered list. However, there is a slight catch over here. You don't really need to order it in the fashion 1 2 3 4 5 6. You can just put one dot is sufficient to make it understand that this is an ordered list. Okay, however, the numbering will be taken care by notebook automatically. See, I have written over here 1 dot 1 dot 1 dot, but in the rendered effect it's all the time showing is 1 2 3, and as many times as you want, you can do this, and every time it will increase the count. The idea is to have this format, one dot and then right space. So this space is also important. So this whole thing, these three characters constitute the reserved text with which identifies it to be an ordered list. Okay, so this way we can create ordered lists. Okay, what next? Yeah, if I have to create a link, we surround it with we do it like this. Okay, so we have square brackets, and after square bracket, you see, if I have to do, so this is a code cell, I converted to text cell. You see, I need to write the text that I want to write, and then after that I need to put that within the uh, put that within the parenthesis. So square bracket, and immediately after that we need to do the parenthesis. Let me give you a better example. Suppose I want to write google.com. Okay, so what I'll do, I want to do google.com. So google.com is the text that will be displayed. I will surround it with a square bracket, and at the end I need to put parenthesis, and within this I will put, in fact this should be the complete address. Okay, so complete address, let me just copy. So this is the complete address. Complete address means HTTPS. Okay, yeah, I didn't want to type that anyhow. So this is the complete address, and this complete address is going to give you the google.com linkage. Now you see over here, as soon as I click, it will open a new Google page for me, right? So this becomes a link. Now this is a link. If in place of this link, suppose you have an image, okay, so you want this image to be embedded over here. Let me just find an image. um, Flower. Okay, this is a beautiful image. Let me just get the link of it. Okay, and in place of google.com, I'll paste the link. However, you see in the right hand side it is still showing google.com, and if I click on this link, it will open a new tab, and in that new tab it will open that image. But I didn't want that. What I wanted was to open this in this, to show that image in here only. Okay, so for that I just need to do something extra. I need to put an exclamation mark. Mhm. Let me take another. I think there is might be copyrighted, that is why. I'm not doing anything wrong, as it says like this. PNG. Okay, I need to put, right. It will not work. Fine. I need to take some other uh .png. Uh, Anyhow, no worries. I already have a file with me, so I can use that. Okay, let's use this news article. Okay, I'm just going to put it over here. Okay, and I'm going to use this news article, the copy path. No, actually, I want to put this. Aditya is saying remove asterisk before your Google statement, then the picture will go to open up Google. No, Aditya, that is my that is what I wanted to do. I want to link to an image and then I want to show it over here. That was my objective. I have actually done that. I don't know why it is not doing it, but let me just take that code. Just give me a second. The catch is I need the link to a PNG file. You see over here. So this file, this image is altogether displayed in this. Okay. So what I was trying to achieve was this effect. I wanted this image to be displayed over here instead of this as a link. I have put, and this effect you can have through using asterisks. Okay. If you put asterisks over here and whatever name you want to show, that doesn't matter. But if you miss the asterisk, it will display the text that is written within the square bracket, and this link will be the link on which it will go to if you click on this my image text. However, if you put asterisk over here, if you put the exclamation mark over here, if you put the exclamation, the image will be displayed in this text cell itself. Okay, you see how beautiful this image looks. The catch is to find the image, find the link to the file, not the dynamic URL. Dynamic URL will not work because if I if I try to take the link of this file, this is a dynamic URL. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so static URLs which are directly referring to the file are necessary over here. So that is the catch. Okay, so I think I was able to demonstrate this part. Now let's see what is left. Yes, so you understood how to put links, you understood how to put images. Now LaTeX can also be written over here. You can have all the LaTeX equation, you can have all the LaTeX formatting by using the dollar prefix and postfix suffix. So using this, what you do, you just surround your content. If you have to write some mathematical equation, you surround it using dollar, and then you can have this kind of effect in which the text is written as an inline equation or inline equation. In fact, if you put double dollar, then this will be like you see, I show you over here. Okay, so if you put single dollar, y equal to 1.06x. Okay, sorry. So y equal to 1.06x, this is inline equation. However, if I want to write this as a centered equation, independent equation, I need to surround it with double dollar. So you see the difference between two. This is an inline equation. The first one, when I write single dollar, inline equation means these equations are within the line. And when you have to show an independent equation, the floating equation, centralized one, you put double dollars over there. Okay. Now you can create horizontal rules like these by writing any type of character 3 times, right? Like this, like this. You just need to put 3 times or asterisk underscores. So these create horizontal rules. Horizontal rules means horizontal lines. Okay. If you have to create a table, then table creation is just done like this. You have to put the content and then vertical line between them. Is an example. Let me show you that example. Yes, like this one. You write the first column, then vertical line. Okay, just be above the enter button on your keyboard, then second heading and so on, and then this is created. This horizontal rule is created. Horizontal rule is created using, you see over here I have, okay, you see this creates the horizontal rule. Let me see if horizontal rule is again created like this. No, you need to put the horizontal rule by putting minuses. Okay, so using minus it will create this. Okay, but in every space you see row 1 column 1, and then you need to put this vertical sign to indicate that the next column is going to start from here. So as many columns as you want, you can have them, but the idea is to put this. Okay, so see first column, second column, and third column. Okay, this is how you can create tables. Now, so with this, I hope you understood how to do the formatting and to show how the what all can be done with in terms of formatting in the Google Colab. Now, let us start doing some real useful work. So in this session, I'm going to give you a hands-on on a small neural network, which is called multilayer perceptron. And yesterday when Professor Oja was talking about multi-layer perceptron, and I'm really sorry about that because the recording that is produced by WebEx is not complete recording. It is either showing the video or showing the slide, but that too intermittently. So there is the recording that is created is very bad. Unfortunately, we don't have any control. I think I saved it on my desktop. That is why it produced some error. Had I saved it on cloud, it would have produced better result, just like the other videos which are being stored on the cloud. But cloud storage has a problem that it stores on cloud, then creates the proper MP4 file, and then it downloads. So yes, I don't know what that WebEx setting is, and we get to learn from our mistakes. We get to learn from our mistake, and only then we get to see that what error could happen. And I'm really sorry for that loss of the video of Professor Oja, because I saw so many students asking question, and I really appreciated the fact that you guys were interested in the lecture and you listened to that. So in that, Professor Oja actually talked about multilayer perceptron, and multilayer perceptron is nothing but a shallow neural network. Nowadays, we all are learning about deep neural network. Okay, Appaji, I will take your help if somehow that video can be converted. Is it possible that we can convert that video? I will talk to you separately. Okay. So what is done, right? Yeah, future recording, actually, I have learned from a mistake. I'm recording it on cloud, and then I am downloading that later in the evening. So I think we are good here, or I will take your help if I need anything. Definitely. Thank you. So multi-layer perceptron is nothing but a shallow neural network. Whatever we are discussing in today's term, the buzzword is deep learning. Okay, what is deep learning? Deep learning is nothing new. It's an advanced version of the artificial neural network that we have been studying for past 60, 70 years now. So previously, these artificial neural networks, the NN and ANNs, were called multi-layer perceptron because perceptron is a computational unit in which we compute something and we get the output out of that. Okay, so just like yesterday, when Professor Uja was talking about, she actually told you that a neuron is nothing but a computational unit which takes input. Okay, a lot of different inputs will be given to the neuron. It performs something and produces an output. Okay, that output is passed on to an activation function, this function, activation function, and the output is produced. Okay, this whole thing is a perceptron. Okay, now what is happening over here in these two steps? I tell you, when I do this summation, what are we summing up is input and its corresponding weight. What is input? In these input, in these connections, we are getting inputs. So it is first connection gives me input x1, second connection gives me input x2, third connection gives me input x3, input x4, and so on. Okay, so suppose I have got 4 inputs and 4 inputs are being given to a computational unit. So what is happening is that I have got 4 inputs, and along with 4 input on every edge, I would have a weight value. Okay, so corresponding to x1, I will have a weight value w1. Corresponding to x2, I will have a weight value w2. Corresponding to x3, I will have a weight value w3, and corresponding to x4, I will have a weight value xw4. And after all the inputs, we have a very unique thing which is called bias. Okay, so this bias is represented as B. I am sorry for the bad handwriting because I'm using this keypad. Okay, and the mouse. So that is why my handwriting is bad. I'm really sorry for that. So you see, what is the effect that is taking place? All the inputs are being passed to this sigma node. So x1 with along with w1, x2 along with w2. So let me put a dot over here, 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 indicating that x1 is multiplied with w1 and then passed on to this node. X2 is multiplied with w2, passed on to this node. X3 multiplied with w3, passed on to this node. X4 multiplied with w4, passed on to this node. And then bias B also has some weight. I call it w5. It is even bad. X5. Okay, w5. So now this w5 will also be multiplied with bias and then passed on to sigma. So what is happening is that I am effectively taking a weighted sum of all the inputs. So W's are the weight values associated with input, and I am multiplying that with the input values, then summing it all up, so that what I get as output over here is represented as Z, and Z could be called as the weighted sum of all inputs. Okay, so Z is the weighted sum of all input. Now Z is passed on to this function which is called activation function. Activation function is something which creates a kind of partition between what is accepted and what is not. Activation function, yesterday we were told that the most common activation function is sigmoid activation function. Sigmoid activation function has this expression sigma equal to 1 upon 1 plus e to power minus z. Okay, and you see this z is actually the same z that I have just calculated. Okay, this is the weighted sum. Z is the weighted sum that I have obtained over here. This z is passed on to this function, which is an activation function called sigmoid activation function. We pass to it, and sigmoid activation function has an S shape, has a shape of S. It's an asymptotic function, a kind of slight S. It creates an asymptotic function. It gets a value of 0 when the input is very small, and it gets a value of 1 when the input is large. So this squashes, this is also called a squashing function, sigmoid function, or a logistic function. It squashes the input into a range of 0 to 1, and 0 to 1 we have the probability value. So we want our output to be a probability value which is an indicator of whether the value is accepted or not. If the value is greater than 0.5, we say that okay, there is a higher probability that the output will be accepted. If it is less than 0.5, there is a lower probability that value will be accepted. Similarly, activation function, as the name suggests, it works as a trigger. It activates. If the probability value, output value, is greater than 0.5, we say the neuron has activated itself. If the probability value is less than 0.5, we say the neuron has not activated itself, neuron is not firing. Okay, and it all goes from our brain. Our brain cells are firing, our brain cells are activated, our brain cells are reacting, our brain cells are is responding, stimulated, or is working. Similarly, the same simulation is applied over here. That is why it is called an activation function. Okay, so a neuron is nothing but this is a rectangular box in which whatever mathematics is happening inside this is the output of a neuron. And a neuron is also called a perceptron. Neuron is also called a perceptron, right? So it perceives what is happening, and according to that, it takes a decision. It takes the decision whether to activate itself or not. So you see, a multi-layer perceptron is a basic neural network where the hidden layers are densely connected vectors. That is, neuron in one layer is connected to every other neuron in that layer. In this tutorial, we are going to construct one such network to classify MNIST handwritten digit database. We will build the network progressively, evolving it at every step to fit our needs. Okay. So due to stochastic nature of our model, your results might differ from previous ones already documented. Please take that with a grain of salt. And I hope all of you will be able to write this code in your Colab file and execute along with me, so that if you face any problem, I'll be able to solve it right here. So will you be able to do that with me? Okay, there is a question from Jyoti Shokin. What is the purpose of bias? I think this question was asked yesterday, and I would expect an answer from you guys. After that, I'll definitely explain what is the purpose of bias, but then for freedom. Freedom from what? Yes, Chandrika. Freedom from what? Anyone, if somebody wants to speak, they can unmute themselves and speak. It's an interactive session. Please let us interact. Otherwise, afternoon sessions are normally boring and you might sleep. So I don't want you guys to sleep. It's not lullaby I'm reciting over here. It's that is why I have kept a hands-on session, so that you get interested and work with me. Okay. If there are no answers, let me explain why we use bias, right? Two weights, freedom to weights. No. Okay. Let me explain now. Everywhere you see, of course, bias has a literary meaning, that something is biased towards something. Okay. I might be biased towards students joining from Triple IT Allahabad, students joining from Triple IT Nair Airport. These are my institutes, so I might be biased towards them. That is natural. That is biasing. Okay, somebody might be biased towards their children. Somebody might be biased towards their students. Somebody might be biased towards their country, their language, their region. So many things, so many people are there. We are human. But that is biasing, literary meaning of biasing. Okay. Why are we biased? We are biased because we don't want to get into the actual detail. We have our notion and we want that notion is very simple. I belong to UP, I'm biased towards UP. I belong to India, I'm biased towards India. I don't want to get into detail of the complication, that why should I make this decision unbiasedly. Okay. So I don't want to get into complication. So I want to keep my life simple. I don't want to see the detail. I want to see too many detail. I want to explore. Don't want to explore. I don't want to get into the information. I don't want more information. I just have a notion, and according to that notion, I want to keep my life simple, and that is why I preserve this bias. So from the literary meaning of biasing, I'm shifting towards the machine learning meaning of biasing. In machine learning, bias is a representation of simplicity. Okay. Bias is a representation of simplicity or a measurement of simplicity. Why do I call it a measurement of simplicity? Let me just give you an example. Okay. Uh, Let me take some names. Aditya, are you there? Okay, let us interact. Aditya, if you are there, probably if you can unmute yourself and speak. Or anybody. Appaji, if you are there. Okay, I think guys can unmute themselves. Jyoti, okay, Jyoti, let me just unmute you. Yeah, Miss Jyoti. Okay, suppose suppose you have are you a faculty somewhere?
No, sir, I'm a research scholar.
Okay, so suppose you are taking a class, right? Or just forget something. Suppose I want you to describe some person. Okay, so suppose you
Okay.
have taken a class and there is a student who has performed very poorly or probably has fallen sick, and you have taken that student to hospital, and now you are going to report it to some your administrator that this girl has fallen sick and I have taken her to the hospital. So they would want you to explain the girl. Who is the girl? Okay, you know the name, they don't know
Mm.
name. Okay, so you give them the name. So what all properties of that girl would you explain? You would explain, you would give them the name, one feature, first name, last name, suppose two features. Then they
Okay.
don't recognize. Then you say, okay, this is her roll number, this is her mobile number, this is her address, anything, father, mother, everything you try to explain, they will not be able to recall the student. Suppose I'm just imagining.
Okay, sir.
So what all information, suppose you have to explain that girl to somebody and the person says that, okay, let me draw a sketch. What all information would you tell the person that the person will be able to draw a sketch of the girl?
So
Let's
the
say
features, the facial features.
facial features. Okay, so as you said feature, I really wanted to use this term feature. So in machine learning, all of us use features. Okay, every data point has a feature. So I am trying to find out the facial features. What all feature would you explain? Very simply, her
So the
eyes.
eyes,
Start with
her nose,
eyes, nose. Okay, let's count the number of features. So eyes, nose, two,
uh, shape of lips,
shape of lips, three, face cut,
shape of
four,
face, face
face,
shape,
four. Okay,
hair color,
hair color, five,
mm, that the
prop
ears are not
six,
so broad, or you can say
6 years. That's it. Years.
there's no mark over the face.
Okay, seven, forehead
Okay.
probably eight, right?
There
Or the
is
cheeks.
maybe some mole
Huh?
over the maybe some mole over the face.
Okay, okay. Let's say nine. Suppose I double this count. Okay. and you
Okay, sir.
very accurately remember that girl, and you were able to point out 9 features. But let me just double this number, 18 and 18 features. Okay,
Okay.
somehow you are able to remember those 18 features, facial features, and explain it to the person sitting in front of you. Do you think that person will be able to accurately draw the face of that girl without missing anything? Do you think this is possible?
So it may not be 100% precise, but to some extent, it
To
will.
some extent, I understand, but will it be 100%? I'm looking for 100%. Will it be
Sir, as
100%?
maybe, sir, not.
Maybe not. So what am I missing over here, that the person sitting in front of me is not able to get the 100% accurate image?
Yes, sir.
I'm missing something, right? You are missing something, or we are missing something. So some of the information we have missed telling the person. That is why that person is not able to draw the 100% accurate image. I'm just concerned with 100%. I'm not happy with anything less than 100%, right? So you
Yes.
also agree that whatever information we provide to the person sitting in front of us, the person will not be, probably not be able to draw the 100% accurate image. So what did I miss? Okay, let me rephrase my question. I definitely missed something. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
But what I missed, I don't know, because you counted 9 features. Suppose I trust your capability, and I increased it to 18 features, that you remember the girl so well that you were able to find out 18 different unique features and explain it to the person who is drawing the sketcher. But even after telling 18 features, the person was not able to draw the face of that student perfectly well. So you missed something, but you still do not know what did you miss. Okay,
Okay, sir.
that is taken care by the bias. Okay, so in any feature, in
Hmm.
any data point, if I am trying to find out features, right, like a face is a data point. So any data point, suppose images, facial images are there. So if that image is displayed in terms of feature, if the image is explained in terms of features, how so many features you create, you will still be missing something that you do not know. But that will never be 100% exact explanation of the face. So what we say is that whenever we describe a data point, a real life data point, in terms of feature value, feature vector, there is always a possibility that we are missing some information. We don't know what information we are missing, but there is always a possibility that we are missing some information that we do not know. To account for that missed information, we always keep a bias. Okay, so what, suppose the person sitting in front of you is a computer uh, software, computer program, and that is trying to draw the image of the girl. So you gave 18 information, 18 feature to the computer program, but still something is missing. That something can never be identified in machine learning. See, first thing you should always keep in mind, this is an introductory development workshop. So we always focus on the introductory thing, because second part is the one in which we'll be talking about advanced concept, and then we will not get back to an introductory part. Machine learning is always approximate. It is never 100% accurate. It can never give you 100% accurate result. So if it is approximate, all the features that you are able to create for a given data point will never be able to account for the real life data. They are always missing some information, and that missing information is taken care by bias. So suppose I have to create a linear equation out of the features that you have explained to me. Let me say I have got x you all know what are x1, x2, x3, and how do we represent our data, right? So our data values are x1, x2. In yesterday's class, Dr. Tiwari would have explained about how do we uh, handle data. So suppose I have x1, x2, x3, okay, x4, and so on. These are feature values. These are feature values, and I suppose I have x100. These are feature values. So I have 100 information regarding one data point, and this data point is called x. For one x, I have got 100 information, small. But these 100 will not be, we know as a machine learning practitioner, we know that whatever number of features we put will never be able to account for the real life data point. So what we do when we create the data model, we first feed these x inputs. So let's say these are 100 input. So starting from 1, 2, 3, I feed 100 values, and then I feed a bias. Okay, that take these 100 values which have been measured. We know these are measured values, but still, if something is missing, blame it on the bias. That bias will take care of it. Okay. So I give you another example. So bias is a measurement of simplicity. If bias is too much, bias is too big, it means these data points are missing. Fine. You have very small number of description and you put bias along with that. So bias is big, simplicity is too big. Bias is small, simplicity is too small, complexity is too much. Suppose I want you to explain a tree. Okay. Suppose I want you to explain a tree. How does a tree look like? So what would you say? Like yesterday, Professor Oja was giving this example, like blind man's elephant. I think Professor Vyas was giving this example. Blind man's elephant. How does a blind man identify an elephant? Okay. He touches trunk. He says that it's like a pipe, and he touches legs. It's like a pillar. He touches the stomach. He says that this is like a big wall, something like he touches the tail and he says it's like a brush, anything like that. So but all of these observations are not wrong, but in totality they are totally wrong, right? So if I ask you, can you tell me how does a tree look like? So you tell me that if your model is very simple, if your explanation is very simple, what you would say that a model or tree is something which is green on top and brown on bottom. Okay, so you gave me two information: green, top is green, bottom is brown. So if suppose somebody is wearing a green shirt and brown pant, that person should not be called a tree. Okay, the person doesn't become a tree just because he is green in the top and brown in the bottom. So this explanation or this model is very simple. So this explanation is not good. We need more information. So at this point of time, if this is the complete explanation, what do I say? My model is underfitting. My model is underfitting. What I am lacking is information. Okay, so I have only two information: top green and bottom brown, and plus bias. So in this case, suppose I say that my model is very simple and I am willing to explain a tree: x1, x2, and plus bias. These three values are there, right? So if I want to explain my model in these three terms, x1 says green, x2 says brown, and rest of the things are left to bias. What I do not know is left to bias. And of course, if I'm trying to explain a tree with only this two information, there is a lot to be known. So bias is too big. All the model is very simple. With these two information, I explain the tree, right? But do you think this is correct information? No. So I need more information. how does a tree look like? Okay, so there should be top and there should be bottom. Top should be green, bottom should be brown. There are roots. Okay, so there are roots. How many roots? You say that, okay, I saw a tree that had 5 roots and I saw a tree which had 3 branches. So 3 branches which were green, branches covered with leaves, so they were green, brown trunk and 5 roots. Okay, so I added 2 more information, x3 and x4, and this bias value. So whatever was unknown was blamed on the bias. Now 2 more information is known to me. So what will happen to bias? The bias value is shrink. It will become small because now the unknown is getting smaller. I'm getting more information. I'm knowing more information. But when you know more, the model becomes complex. So from one end of underfitting, you are moving towards overfitting. Right? Remember the lecture of Professor Oja and Professor Vyas. From underfitting, you are moving towards overfitting. If a model is underfit, if the model is underfit, you have huge bias. Bias is big. Large. Bias is large. Why bias is large? Because the model is very simple. You do not know anything and everything is left to bias. What is unknown is left to bias. But if you move towards overfit, okay, overfit. The overfit model is also not very good. Why not very good? Because too much of complexity cannot be handled by our computational models. Variance is large. Variance is high. My mouse is not following me. Okay. Bias is large. Variance is small. Variance is small. And vice versa. Here bias is small. Is small. Okay, so if you are creating an underfit model, you do not know many things, so x values are very few, x1 x2 only, remaining are left to bias. If it is overfit, you have x1 x2 x3 x4 x5 x10 x100 and so many features are known to you. Bias is very small, unknown is very small, but the variance is very high, because then with so many different features, you know too many things about the data point. Like suppose I take this example of a tree. So I have a palm tree in front of me, so I can say as many shreds of leaf, those many, if I count that it has got 3229 leaves, then one branch, one trunk, and say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 10 branches of leaf, and then one trunk, and then 20,450 roots. That information is also not very good, because then you are making it very precise. Tree is not like that. Tree needs to be some kind of a generic model, a general model in which somebody sees a tree, identifies the tree. So tree cannot be very specific, very particular overfit model that, okay, these many roots, these many trunks, these many branches, these many leaves. No, it has leaves, it has branches, it has trunk, it has roots, but how many, that we don't need to specify. Then the model becomes overfitting, has overfitting problem. Then variance is very high, and bias, that is measurement of simplicity, is very small. But if you don't explain anything, top is green, bottom is brown, that is also not a tree, not a complete explanation of a tree. It's a very simple explanation. Then bias. So what I do not know about tree is put into bias. Okay, that is why in every model we introduce a bias. We introduce a bias saying that, okay, I know these features, I'm able to explain these features, but then what is unknown to me is taken care by bias. So along with 10 features, bias also become 11th feature, but bias value is not known to you. You cannot specify bias value. Bias value is learned by the model automatically, because if I know the bias value, that becomes a feature. That is not bias anymore. Okay. So bias is something which you do not know, and you really do not know what that would be. Right. So similarly, I am trying to explain phase. I explained many things, but still I'm missing something, but I don't know what I'm missing. So let it be learned by the bias. That feature I call as, that collective information we call as a feature, and that feature is called a bias. Okay. So if the bias is learned, that unknown feature is learned by the model. Fine. I hope I was able to explain the bias to you. So everywhere we put bias, because let the features be there, let the known values be there. Unknown is taken care by bias. If unknown is too big, it means you don't know anything about the model. Then model is very simple. That is why underfitting is there. So in case of underfitting, bias value is too big and variance value is too small. If bias value is very small, it means too much information is given. Too much information means no, it's about a particular data point. So if you have explained a particular data point too thoroughly, that should also not happen. Okay. Too much complication is not a good thing for machine learning model. So we have to create a balance between underfitting and overfitting. Too big a bias, too small a bias. Too big a variance, too small a variance. Okay. So this balance is the fundamental concept in which all machine learning models are created. Most of the time we say that decision trees are prone to overfitting. Then what is happening over there? Lot of information is provided. The rain should happen, the wind should be like this, the humidity should be like this, the sunlight like this, temperature should be like this, the speed like should be like this. All these details are provided, and when we split the decision tree up to the last leaf, then too much information has been utilized. So bias is very small, variance has become too big, and the model becomes overfitting model. So I hope I was able to explain bias to you, and we put bias everywhere. We should put bias everywhere. Okay. Let us move on quickly to this. Okay. So this neural network model, in which I am going to utilize the TensorFlow library, TensorFlow and Keras library over here, and I'll share this code with you. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand how a neural network, a small neural network, is created, and then we can move on to bigger neural networks in the later second part of the FDP, not this time. But it is a small neural network that we'll create, and we'll try to identify handwritten digits. So we import some of the libraries from Keras. We import models, layers, some utility functions we will import. We are going to create a sequential neural network which will move from left, which will move data from left hand side to right hand side, or probably from bottom to top. And then we have different types of layers: dense layer and an activation layer. Okay, so we have imported all these. So let me just run this cell so that we don't miss any code, part of code. And you see, Python is an interpreted language. So part of code can be executed independently, and then other part can be executed later. So I have executed this part of code, which just imports all the relevant libraries. Now I'm going to use the dataset, MNIST dataset. MNIST stands for Modified National Institute of Standard and Technology Digits. Is a collection of handwritten digits ranging from 0 to 9. It has a training set of 60,000 images and test set of 10,000 images that are classified, already classified in the corresponding categories and labels. So 60,000 will be classified and 10,000 will not be classified. It's a test set, so you have to know it's used for testing only. It is also classified, then only you come to know what is the class, whether it is correctly classifying or not. They are grayscale images of the size 28 by 28 pixel. MNIST.load data function sets up the training and testing set along with the assigned label, and as we will implement, you can also download dataset separately from this link and set it up to be loaded from your Google Drive. Okay. So one thing I wanted to tell you, let's Okay. Suppose I have something and I want to import, just like I showed you from here in the Google Drive. You see, in the Google Colab, you have some tabs over here. This is called table of content. These are table of contents. These are table of contents, and whatever I have created over here, then you can search and replace from here. This is for finding the code snippets, and this is the file directory structure. In this, you see I have my drive mounted over here, but if your drive is not mounted, you can mount it through this. Let me restart and show you. With this button, you can mount the Google Drive, and it will mount it for you. Connect to Google Drive. So it's mounted, and yeah, it is mounting Google Drive. So this drive is the Google Drive that is mounted, and you can see my drive and all the files that I have over here are mounted in it. Okay. So anything you have in your Google Drive, you can access that and you can utilize that data. All you need to do is just go to that file, whichever file you want to use, either right click or click this dot and copy path, and then specify the path where from you are trying to load the data set. You will be able to load it. You specify the path just like I had specified for that image. Yeah, this image, you see I had specified this path. Just like this, you specify the path and you will be able to access that. So this data set, let me execute it for you. When I run it this mnis.load data function is called, and then it is data is loaded and it is returned in two tuples. One tuple has train data, so x train data set features and y train are the label, and then this tuple is the test data set. X test are the features and y test are the label. So if I want to see the shape, you see this is the shape of train data, 60,000 samples with 28 by 28 pixel sizes, and then test shape is 10,000 samples with 28 by 28 pixels. What we are dealing with over here are tensor. In the tensor flow, the basic data structure is the tensor. Okay, and the flow of that tensor is actually the whole game, how we are dealing with tensor, how we are dealing with the data. So the data structure in which we store the data is called tensor. That is simple data structure, a multi-dimensional array. So if it is a multi-dimensional array, there are different dimensions of the data. Every image is a four-dimensional data tensor. Four-dimensional data tensor means it's a four-dimensional array, numeric array, which has different axes, different dimension for different values. So if you are working with TensorFlow, this is the designated axis. So first axis, that's 60,000. 60,000 is designated for number of samples. So how many sample you have is the number that is specified on the first axis. Second axis specifies width or height. Height or width, width or height, depends which one is it is taking. So height and width, second and third specify height and width. And the fourth dimension specifies the channel. What do we mean by channel? If it is a colored image, you have RGB 3 channels, and if it is a grayscale, you have single channel. In TensorFlow, this is the pattern which is followed. However, in Theano is another library and the language which is supported by Colab. You have channel as the second dimension. However, height and width are the third and fourth dimension. Keras is a wrapper library which works on top of both Theano as well as Tensor. So if Keras is wrapper, means what I'm trying to say over here is that sometimes TensorFlow and Theano looks tough, right? So you have to just initialize an array, or probably to create a layer, you have to write 4 or 5 different lines of code, and Keras does that with single line of code by calling a single function. So Keras works on top of TensorFlow or Theano. Theano and TensorFlow are two different languages. So Keras supports both. So using Keras, our life becomes simpler, easier. So you have this, now you have got this training data. X train is 60,000, Y train is 10,000, test X test is 10,000. Now you see these are the data points. These are the data points. If you want to see your y train is actually numbered like this 504 etc. It says that the first image is an image of digit 5, second image is an image of digit 0, third image is an image of digit 4, and so on. Similarly, if you want to see the image, you see it says test, and let me draw the test x test 0. See, x test, the first image that I have is the image of 110 digit 7, and that is what is the label also. So y test means the label that is there with the image. The first image is 7, indicating that it is an image of digit 7. Now with this we will test later. When we start our model creation, first things should be done, that first of the thing is that you should check whether your data is evenly distributed or not. Data should be equivalently distributed in all classes if it is a classification problem. So in this example, you see this is the way we execute, and we see what is the class label and how many samples belong to which class label. So you see, so 5,923 samples in 0, then 6,742, and so on. So we see that we are more or less very even in number of samples per class. Okay, so that gives us an idea that okay, this is a fairly equivalently distributed data points. We have got 60,000 samples, so we have got many samples over here. Now, there is a difference between categorical and one hot encoding. In categorical, what we do, we have categories. Okay, so how many categories do we have over here in our data sample? We have got 10 categories. With respect to every digit, we have got a handwritten image. So suppose we have an image of 0, so 0 belongs to class 0, and I want my neural network in such a way that I will have an end like this. I will have 10 nodes, 10 neurons, 4, 5, I start with this 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I will have in my output layer 10 neurons, and suppose the image belongs to digit 7, then this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This neuron should give me 1, and remaining should give me 0. This is what I want my neural network to output. Okay, my neural network will output in this fashion. If I wanted to display in this fashion, then what do I mean? I mean that I want a vector, a numeric vector, which will be like this. A numeric vector, this is 0, sorry, this is 0. So this vector will have all zeros except the label, the class label. And in this case, in my first example, the class label is 7. So except the label 7, the index number 7, all other indices should be giving me a value 0. And since I'm going to use the sigmoid function produces an output between 0 to 1. So except 7th index, all the indices should have a value of 0, only 7 index should be a value 1. But my output is not in this fashion. My output gives output is in this format: 5 0 4 1 9 2 1 3 1 4. So I have to convert my output from categories to one hot encoding. This is called one hot encoding, in which from all the vector values, only one value will be 1 and remaining will be 0, indicating just the presence of one value, single value, and absence of remaining values. This is called one hot encoding. Okay. So we use this to convert our, we use this function two categorical function to convert our categorical variable to one hot encoding. Now this is the one hot encoding. So first one was 0. First one was 5. So 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is 1 and remaining are 0. Okay. Now we need to prepare our image. We need to prepare our image in the vector format. Fine. So our image was 60,000 by 28 by 28. We need this already created. So instead of 28 by 28, we need one long vector. And how many vectors, how many values there are? We need 784, I think. There will be 28 by 28, 784 something, I suppose. I don't remember. So 28 by 28, 28 into 28 values will be there. One vector, a single vector. It's not a two-dimensional vector that I want. So I reshape it, and then all the values need to be converted, standardized between 0 to 1. So for that we divide it by 255, because 0 to 255 is the range in which values will be. All of these are grayscale values. So grayscale values range from 0 to 255. So if I divide all values by 255, the range will be limited to 0 and 1. The maximum will be divided by 255 becomes 1, and minimum will still be 0. So let me execute this. I will get all my data points standardized. Then I create the network. Okay. So models dot sequential. I'm going to create a sequential model because I want my input from input layer to then hidden layer and then output layer. So I want this sequential model. How many layers do I add over here? I'm adding 2 layers. Okay. And all of these are dense layer. Dense layer means all the neuron of one layer are connected to all the neurons of the next layer. So this is a dense. I have put this value 512 because I want 512 neurons in the first layer, that is hidden layer of the neural network. You can have as many neurons as you want. Okay. Activation function is ReLU. ReLU is another activation function, just like sigmoid activation function, but its pattern is like this. It gives 0 and then X. So its function is Y equal to max of 0 comma X, either X or 0. If X is less than equal to 0, then it will give 0. If it is greater than 0, then it will give X value. Okay, so ReLU is function. Input shape is 28 by 28 that we have already defined, right? So, and we add another layer, that is output layer. And output layer, as I told you, since we have 10 classes, we need 10 nodes. This is activation. Okay, so we have one hidden layer and one output layer, and the first layer is input layer. So very simple, very basic. Okay, keeping it very simple, and with this simple network itself, we will be able to achieve good accuracy. So you see, so one hidden layer with 512 neurons and one output layer. Now, so when I see this summary, let me execute this so that model will be created. Okay, did I not run anything? Oh, sorry. Okay. I think it is running something. Yeah, here it is training. I have actually executed all of them. So you see, model will be created, and then once model is created, it looks like this. There are two layers, dense 1 and dense 2. First layer has got 512 neurons. Second layer has got 10 neurons. The output layer, and there are 507,050 different parameters which need to be learned. Okay, so it's a very simple, very straightforward, very small neural network, but still you have got 4 lakh parameter, 4 lakh 7,000 parameters to learn. So that is why neural network is not a simple model. It's a very complex and very compute intensive model. But before we start executing, we need to define 3 more things with every neural network. The optimizer, first the loss function. Okay, loss function calculates the difference between what is expected and what is produced. That difference is called loss or the error. Then using that loss, we train the neural network. We train the neural network, that C neural network. This is the loss, this is the difference, this is the error that you have produced. So whatever you are producing is not as per my expectation. So you modify yourself, you learn something so that you produce better result. Okay. Okay. Why do we convert values from 0 to 255 to 0 to 1? Because we don't want to deal with big values. Big values, suppose it is 255. So either it is 0 or it is 255. The intensity of the image has no effect on that, because a white pixel versus black pixel, I cannot say that white pixel is not important and black pixel is important, because it's just color, and due to this contrast I am seeing the color, right? I'm seeing the image. So image that I have drawn over here, you see there are some white pixels. So presence of white pixel says that digit is not drawn, and presence of black pixel says digit is drawn. So if it is 255, it means that digit will be, that pixel will be white, and if it is 0, means that pixel will be black. But is there any difference between white and black pixel? No, both of them are equally important to me. But what about the numeric value 0 versus 255? 255 is a big number. If I do a square of 255, that will be a huge number, and if I do a square of 0, that will still be 0. So 255 is easily going to dominate this 0 value. Okay, and since we are playing with numbers in this programming everything, so 0 will be dominated and 0 will be ignored in the pipeline. But I don't want that. That is why what we do, we play with the small number. What we do, we divide everything and bring it down to 0 to 1. We normalize everything. Okay, that is why I have divided everything by 255. So loss, you understood. Optimizer is something of an algorithm which takes the loss value and then trains the neural network. And matrix is accuracy. Accuracy tells me that how good my model is at this point of time. Okay, how accurate my model is. So let us start training of this neural network. Now there are 2 terms that I want to explain over here. One is epoch and the other is batch. Okay, yesterday also Professor Roja was talking about epoch and batch. Over here you would see this working. You see, I have got 5 epochs. Okay, 5 epochs means my 60,000 training samples will be trained 5 times. 60,000 samples will be shown to the network 5 times. So 3 lakh samples are being trained, because 60,000 samples 5 times means 3 lakh samples being trained. However, 60,000 is same. Okay, 60,000, then 60,000, then 60,000, then 60,000, then 60,000. So one epoch means all the training samples are shown to the neural network at least once. So that is one epoch. Okay. Batch means out of those 60,000, I need a small batch to be fed, because computational power of this machine or the neural network is not that big that it can handle all 60,000 training samples in one shot, right? Otherwise, I would have done this batch size to be 60,000. So 60,000 in one shot, all 60,000 samples are passed on to my machine, but no machine is at this point of time capable of handling 60,000 images in one go. So what I do it 128 sample. 128 number is a random number. You don't really have to be concerned about this number. You can do 10, 20, 30, 40, anything. Normally we do it as a power of 2. So that is by 128, 256, 3, 632, something like that. So so if I do it like this, so my batch size means 128 images are fed one time. Then to make it 60,000, I need 469 different batches of 128 images. So 128 image of one batch, and then 469 batches will be passed on. And when 469 batches are shown to the computer model, then one epoch completes. And similarly, I run 5 epochs. So after 5 epoch of training, you see the accuracy, how is it changing? Accuracy is increasing and loss is decreasing. Earlier the loss was 0.4, now it has decreased to 0.03. Accuracy was 0.87, means 87% accuracy. Now it has increased to 98.9, almost 99% accurate. Okay. So you see over here, it tries to see the shape, and although it is still you see it is still 99% accurate, but there are still errors. So to emphasize upon the error, I have actually found out one image which normally gives error. This is the image of 9, which is classified as 6. You see, the 6 is the output. When I predict output model dot predict, I predict 6, but the image is of image 9. So still errors are there, but I'm not here to tell you how to remove the error, but give you a glimpse of how we can perform these mathematical, we can create machine learning models on Colab. Okay. So just a quick recap of how we can load data. See, in scikit-learn, there are different data sets which are easily available. There are 3 data sets like Boston dataset, Iris dataset, and digits dataset. These you can load using calling these load function, load Boston, load Iris, and load digits. Boston contains 503 observation on Boston housing prices. That is a good data set for exploring regression algorithm. Iris dataset contains 150 observation of measurement of iris flower. It has got 3 classes, so I think all of them have 50 samples each. It's a good data set for exploring classification algorithm. Digit data set observation from images of handwritten digit. It is a good data set for teaching image classification that we have already done with MNIST data set. So how do we do that? From scikit-sklearn, import data sets, digits equal to dataset dot load digits, and features. When you load digits, it loads the digits, the values, and then features can be from data, digits dot data, you load feature as well as target. Okay. So feature values are some first number of columns are feature value, and the last column would be the target. And if you try to draw these feature, this is the feature. Okay, these are all the digits which are loaded. What are the digits? Okay, so this way you could load data sets from sklearn, scikit-learn. If you have to load a CSV file, it's very simple. From pandas, we load it as a data frame. So you need pandas library. So panda has this method, read CSV methods. Read CSV method reads the content of a file in the CSV format. Okay, so I had, I think, a CSV file, and I can use that. Okay, let me just use this over here to show you. And whatever file I'm putting over here, this is in temporary session only. As soon as the session closes, those files are gone. So I put this file over here, participants.csv. I can load this participant.csv, or you can use it to load data from the URL also. But let me load it from here itself. Copy path. See, I just saw 2 samples. So 2 samples, I have got these participants. So Ms. Jyoti Shokin and Priya Varshni, these are the 2 people who subscribed. I think the first 2 people, and this is the address along with their header. This is the information that is there. Okay. So with this, it can load the CSV file. clustering using k-means, I'll stop here. Okay, I will or probably we have 15 minutes, so let's move ahead. You see, this is another example in which we can implement k-means clustering, and with this we can implement the clustering algorithm, the unsupervised learning. So it's a very small demo of how we do it. In clustering, if you want to group observation into k groups, k-means clustering is one of the most common clustering technique. And k-mean clustering, the algorithm attempts to group observation into k groups, and with each group having roughly equal variance. The number of groups k is specified by the user as a hyperparameter. K cluster centers points first created at random location. Then for each observation, the distance between each observation and the k center point is calculated. The observation is assigned to cluster as the nearest center point, and then center points are moved to the means of their respective cluster, and this process iterates again and again, so that the center point moves from one cluster to another cluster. At the end, it is in the closest vicinity of maximum number of points. So k means. Now how do you specify k? K is totally your choice. It's a hyperparameter, so you know that value of hyperparameters are not known previously. You have to find them out. Okay. So to implement k-means, we import dataset from scikit-learn. We need a standard scaler to convert them into 0 to 1. Okay. Then we import the k-means class. So we import iris dataset, a dataset.load iris. Iris, this object is created. From this object we load data in the features, and labels, I think labels are not there. So from data itself, we don't need, since it is unsupervised, why do we need labels? Yes. So scalar equal to standard scalar, an object is created, and then a method fit transform is called, which transforms the values between 0 to 1. And then we call the k-means function. We specify number of clusters k, random state 0, and number of jobs equal to -1. We don't, it's a single job only. Okay, we fit it to find out all the clusters. And then scikit-learn k-mean clustering is implemented by the k-means class, as we just saw. The most important thing is number of cluster and cluster. So here in k-means, we already know that iris dataset has got 3 classes. So we choose the number as k. Otherwise, you will have to do a hit and try to find out the classes. Okay, we will have to implement all of them. So these are the classes which are predicted, and this is the actual target. So there is a huge difference between, you see, the first ones are identified as ones while they are zeros. So there are differences. K-means, and this is not producing good result, but more or less results are being produced. Okay. So I'll stop right here. You will have more classes, more lectures for these topics, and you will learn in them. And with this lecture, I was willing to give you an idea of how to work in Colab, how to work on different libraries, how to import, how to load data. Okay. So I think it was helpful. And if you have any question, I'm ready to answer. Okay, attendance. So many times I have told attendance is daily. So if you have done your attendance at least once, I think by now you must have attended 2 sessions. You must have put your attendance. So you don't need to put attendance again. Attendance is just once a day. Any other question? Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you all. I suppose this, yeah, if you have entered attendance once, that's fine. Okay, so I suppose this session was helpful. We will share the information regarding tomorrow's session, and then I hope you will be benefited with the sessions as till now you have been till now. Okay, so again tomorrow we have 3 sessions. and the tomorrow's attendance will be shared tomorrow morning in the class session. See you then tomorrow. The recording and documentation also we will share. Sure. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for attending the session. See you tomorrow. Good night.